Welcome back to the City Ramble, reviewing that game at Villa Park. Goodness me. It's been a while since we've had a defeat. Adam Booker, Matt Kerr on the panel with me, Amos Murphy for this one. We'll kick it off then, as we always do. Hopefully, a little bit of positivity on what has been a gloomy weekend in terms of Manchester City and football in general, really. Adam, moment of the weekend. I know you've seen family. Hopefully you can bring some joy, linking up with people you're not seeing for a while, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's not football related. Well, actually, it is football related, just not this type of football. Yeah, I'm back on the East Coast to visit family and went to a Virginia Tech football game for the first time in about a decade, which is college football. And as many of you know, we've talked about on this podcast before, college football is probably the most comparable sport to European football in the United States. So it was good to get back to a place I went to as a child and see some people from my childhood and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was easily my moment of the weekend.
Matt, I assume your moment of the weekend was seeing City come out wearing that gorgeous generational kit, which somehow looks even worse on the plays than it does on the photos. Anyway, it won't be the first or the last time I mention it on today's show. I try and get past it, but goodness me. Any positivity to sprinkle in before we get on with it?
Well, like I say, it's definitely not the kit. Definitely not the kit. But for me, it was... I didn't set an alarm this morning and waking up thinking, oh shit, it's going to be midday or something now. And it was 11 o'clock. I was like, brilliant. The clocks have gone back. Got an extra hour in bed. So, yes, it's the little wins in life, It's the little wins. But, yeah, that kit, oh, my word. It's bad, like you say, when a footballer, a professional athlete doesn't look good in sportswear. And, it's honking. Absolutely honking.
I have sort of been adamant that I think it's the worst City kit of all time. And I know people have said, well, we had one that didn't have a badge. I actually wish this one didn't have a badge because I think it's an embarrassment to a storied institution and a historic football club like Manchester City that their emblem, their crest is on the front of it. I don't know, Adam, like it somehow, like I said, it somehow looks worse. And what is that blue on the socks about? Like,
I mean,
where have they
the
plucked
good
that
thing
from?
about it is I learned something today. I learned it rains in Manchester.
Oh, no, surely not.
Only
Something
Manchester,
that-
by the way.
Something
Only
that it
Manchester.
only does in
Yeah.
in the 0161 Manny, as City would probably
exactly.
say.
That's the only thing that could probably make it worse, strapping like graffiti text Manny on the back of it or something.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't
Yeah,
give him any ideas. That's probably coming
The
next.
the next
Yeah.
kit is just going to be like the brick facade of the Arndale, and it's just an all brick
Yeah.
kit. Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible. You rightly pointed out in the City Ramble WhatsApp about how we're forever tainted by the '99 Wembley kit. That they'll forever be trying to replicate those horrific colors, and those colors are horrific, but they just
Objectively,
have such
yeah.
a moment in them that makes them great and beautiful and sparks good memories for everybody. But yeah, terrible, absolutely terrible. Hopefully we don't see it again this season.
It's frustrating because City, for so long, were obviously synonymous with the red and black. And I mean, I don't think we've seen a remake of was it 2010 third kit with the red and black? Oh, well, we did see a remake for it. There's fucking hell, Puma did one this summer,
Yeah,
and we saw it for two
For about
matches.
5 minutes.
Well, we had red and black in the treble season. I wanna
Yeah,
say.
yeah. I mean, yeah, and I think that was the first time, off the top of my head, for example, thinking about how much they bring the neon green and try and make that work. Anyway, getting off on the right foot, I guess, Matt, for this review, which is, like I said, obviously City's first defeat since August, and I'm sure long-time listeners to this show, and especially this season, will know the sort of how we usually react to games like this. We're here to sort of air out frustrations, but there's going to be no major head losses or anything like that. However, it was bad, wasn't it? Like from the first minute, basically, just uninspiring and not much going on.
Yeah, just a real lack of creativity, lack of ideas, lack of intensity. It was the 85th minute or something, even when they put up the board up for however minutes they added on at the end. I'm thinking, come on, guys, we're 1-0 down here. Where's the intensity? We need to get Ruben Diaz up front if need be. Do you know what I mean? I need to see something different. And it was just, yeah, it was very, very stale. And I thought we made it very easy for Aston Villa, to be honest. I'm seeing a lot online about Villa having an unbelievable performance. Obviously, they've had a poor start to the season, but I think we made it very easy for them. We didn't really test that back line. I think all I remember, whenever we put a ball into the box, it just hit Amadou Onana's face or head, and the guy wasn't even going for it. It just was bouncing off him. We didn't really, we just didn't make it difficult for them, which hurts the most. It wasn't like we were outclassed, outplayed, outfought. We just didn't step up when we needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, a lot of the focus has been on the starting lineup, and don't get me wrong, when that midfield drops and it's Tajani Reinders, Bernardo Silva as a double pivot, and then Phil Foden just in front of them. I know a lot of people were sat there going, "Oof, like, I'm not sure on that." Obviously, I want to get out of get this clear straight away. Nico Gonzalez was not fit enough to start. Just because he played 30 minutes at the end of the game does not mean that in any sort of situation he was fit enough to start. The idea, I imagine, obviously I don't know, but I imagine this is the idea, would be to not play Nico Gonzalez at all. Obviously, it got to a point where that midfield just wasn't working. Needs must get him through. What would, you start him and he gets more injured and he's out for the next 3 weeks. That's not a risk that you take. Anyway, the alternative would have been Kovacic, and we obviously saw him do that a lot last season. And I think, obviously, this is speaking after the fact, but even at the time, I think that would have been a better option. We don't know Kovacic's fitness state. Obviously, he didn't come off the bench, so, whatever. But, part of me is like, yeah, I'd have preferred that. But another part of me is like, what's Guardiola meant to do? Like, bring Rodri back to life and risk Gonzalez going out injured for a month? It's frustrating, but I can see the thinking behind it.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I didn't walk away from this game thinking that all the issues came from the fact that there wasn't one of Nico or Rodri in the game. I think it didn't help. But, I think City definitely struggled to take control of the game at certain times. But it wasn't like, midway through last season when it was a Kovacic, Gundogan double pivot and they were just getting breezed past by every opposition midfielder. That wasn't necessarily the case. I thought John Stones did well to step up into midfield from center back. I thought Tajani Reinders was actually pretty decent at doing that Rodri and Nico role and playing out of the back and facilitating things to get City moving up the pitch. And I thought under the circumstances of the midfield setup that they needed to use, the fact that there was also no Nico O'Reilly in the game, which I thought is maybe a bigger miss than some people would be willing to point out, because he's somebody that helps a ton out on that left flank to move the ball up the pitch and break the press and all that kind of stuff. For me, largely the issues came from the fact that, I think you talked about the game plan ahead of time. I think certainly part of the game plan, knowing that you maybe had more reinforcements off the bench that couldn't play from the start, like Marmoush and Nico and Ryan Cherki, was to keep it tight, keep yourselves in the game, and try and do something in the last 20 to 30 minutes. And other than a great Matty Cash goal, they largely did that. And I think the result really taints people's view on the performance in this one. And don't get me wrong, there were some shocking moments from City in this game. I thought the wingers were really, really poor. Oscar Bob was...
Don't go into so much detail, because there'll be a big segment where I think everyone's going to have a rant about the wingers, but you're right to bring it up.
But the larger point I'm trying to make is that this performance was not that different from many in the 9-game unbeaten run that City had coming into this. There were plenty of games where City were kind of but they found a way to score. They found a way to hold on and get results, and that's great. But they were never playing 90-minute performances in that unbeaten run. And I think a result like this was coming, where the margins have been so slim for City in a lot of these games, and a lot of the 50-50 moments have gone their way. A ball that falls to Haaland, or Haaland just himself winning games. Where in this one, it was clear a lot of the 50-50 moments weren't going to City. The Haaland nut punch goal that didn't stand, Marmoush being marginally offside, and a lot of those moments that just didn't go City's way. So I don't think this performance was that different from many that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. It's just that a different result paints a completely different picture.
Interesting, Matt. I think the absence of a holding midfielder personally played a lot into it, and we will touch on the wingers, who I thought that department in general is becoming a big worry for me. But I think when you see Nico Gonzalez come on, I agree in the sense that I thought Stones and Reinders did well, sort of when City were in possession, getting the ball to the right outlets, and actually quietly thought Phil Foden had a decent game. Obviously created the most chances on the pitch, but on another day he probably walks away with a couple of assists. it was just whenever that ball gets given away for me, and it did feel a little bit like last season where all Villa had to do was skip by one challenger and suddenly you're bearing down on like a 3v2 or a 4v3 or something like that. And look, again, you go back to what can Pep do? Magic fitness potions and, banish injuries into sort of the nether region. I don't know, but yeah, it was just it was just one of those days where City got bullied in midfield. And fair play to Villa. Emery set them up to do so. I thought Onana was amazing. Kamara's having a great season. He's had a couple of great seasons as well. But yeah, they just got absolutely bullied in that department.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be difficult. Nico not being fit, no Rodri against what is such a physical and industrious midfield. We're not even mentioning Morgan Rogers there, who just ran his socks off today, bullied Tierney Reinders at times. And I think the lack of holding midfielder, I agree with Adam and I agree with you. I think in the first half it was more evident, we need a holding midfield there. We're not really winning many duels. We're losing the ball, and it, like you say, it just looks wide open. But I think in the second half, we had a lot more control. We pinned them back a lot more. And that's when really you want to see these. I know we're going to get onto the wingers. You want to see the wingers and the attacking players create chances and make things happen, which of course they didn't. But I completely agree. In that first half, we looked weak, I think, in the midfield, which is a shame to say. And on another day, if Nico Gonzalez was fit, and I know that's so easy to say, who personally I think has been one of our most underrated players this season, I think it could have been different. When he went down midweek against Villarreal, that was my first thought. I thought, who on earth is going to play there against Villa? Because
would you
just
have gone
know
Kovacic instead, out of interest?
In hindsight, maybe, but I genuinely don't think it would have changed it that much. Like you say, we saw Kovacic getting absolutely steamrolled last season as well, and not to say it would be the same, but I see Kovacic as a similar player to Reinders. He's a ball carrier. He's forward thinking. He's not like Nico or Rodri.
I think this also was a chance for Pep to experiment because we've never seen Tijani Reinders do that role on his own.
Yeah,
Maybe we may have seen it 10 and 15 minutes in the Club World Cup, but that's
I think
kind of
one of the halves against Wydad. So
yeah,
we've basically never seen it.
So I don't know. I don't necessarily put too much blame at Pep's doorstep for that decision because with John Stones being fit enough to play, which is fantastic, and having him be able to step up into midfield, there is a little bit of an extra shield and can help Reinders out with some of that responsibility. But I would suspect next time the issue comes around, which considering Rodri's fitness issues as a whole, it probably will come around again. We might see Kovacic, but I think it was honestly a decent showing from Reinders in that role, and maybe the combination of Kovacic and Reinders looks tenfold better than it was, an aging Gundogan and Kovacic. So I don't know. I don't necessarily blame Pep all that much because I think it was kind of a chance to experiment with a new thing, a new toy that he had and hadn't seen in that position.
Yeah. Matt, just sort of rounding up that first half, it's one of those games to me where Adam made a good point beforehand in the sense that it just felt like it was Aston Villa's day. And you look back with hindsight and, it's easy to say after the fact, but even the sense that, City get the ball in the back of the net in the second half and it's a marginal enough offside. It was clearly offside, but it was, one of those where had the ball been played half a second early, maybe it's a different story. I actually thought City responded quite well after going behind to what was, I don't know if you can pick faults in that goal. Personally, I think it's a bit of a wonder strike, really. Yeah. Haaland, the only fault I could maybe find is Haaland reacting not even half a second too slow. It's a millisecond too slow. And if he does sort of charge him down a tiny bit earlier, maybe it gets blocked, which is something obviously Aston Villa were doing to tremendous effect throughout the game. Otherwise, sat there at half time going, it's just not fall. It's not coming off, and sometimes you do need that look, which Aston Villa certainly did have. City didn't have it. Maybe they could have done more from an attacking point of view. Well, they definitely could have done more from an attacking point of view. But in terms of the balance that first half after going behind, I didn't think it was that bad.
No, I would agree with you. I can't remember when it was. I think 20-ish minutes. I'm sure Haaland had a little 1v1. It wasn't a perfect chance, but it was one of them where so many times you see him run through on goal, open his body up and places it into the far corner, and Martinez just read him very, very well. But that was one of them chances where I thought, ooh, that was that really could have just flipped the game on its head a bit there, and it kind of kind of just didn't. Obviously, the game carried on as it was a little bit, but I know what you mean. We did respond pretty well. But yeah, I think that Haaland chance was a very, very big moment. I don't know what you guys think, but
Yeah,
you
it was
you
a bit
would.
similar to the Arsenal goal, really, wasn't it?
Yes,
in the sense
yes,
that
it was.
almost
Yeah,
identical position. Difference.
I mean, it's such a big moment because, not to open the can of worms again, it's a big moment because you don't feel like any other chances are going to fall to anybody else. Like,
That's true. And
3 years ago, if Haaland scuffs that opportunity, it's all right. Well, Alvarez will get one later on in the game, or Mahrez will get a
Or De
chance
Bruyne,
later in the game, and De Bruyne, they'll bury it. Where you feel like in a game like that where things aren't just going City's way, you kind of feel like that might have been the chance.
And as well as that, sorry, just on the thing,
it's okay.
just it not going our way. Like, even when there was just the ball was just up in the air and it was just almost like bouncing off players and then just straight away landed at the feet of Ollie Watkins or Morgan Rogers, and it was like how it was almost like the ball. It was just like a magnet to the Villa players.
Pau Torres one in the second half. How on earth he's about 2 yards off his goal line and he sticks it over the crossbar? It's bonkers. I do think, I know it sounds stupid and it's not great analysis, but I've watched enough football matches in my life to know sometimes you just do not have the rub of the green and things don't fall your way, and you can't blame the performance on that by any means. Okay, I think second half, part two with the winger chat's gonna be a little bit lengthy, so we'll call it there for part one. Join us after this quick break. Welcome back to the City Ramble. Let's do the 3-word reviews then. Joe Olivier of this parish says on Instagram, glad I missed it. MCFC Daps says, I only need to. Shit wingers. We'll get onto that shortly. That's Shorty Hot. Hello. Says, Shirky needs game time. Berkey says Savinho doesn't start. Alexei says it's that kit. Joao says Reinders not DM. Let's see, any more. Someone else calling for Reinders step up, so wanting a little bit more from Reinders. Peter says wrong starting 11. Jake says Shirky, Doku, Marmouche. It took my breath away then. Adam. The wingers. I just don't think they're good enough for City. And this was a conversation coming into the season we were having, and it was almost... It was the same conversation, but in a different guise. It was like, okay, City now need these wingers to step up and do something. It isn't, we're not reinventing the wheel with this take. It's been said quite a while, but I think today was the first time that we've truly seen it manifest because of, like you say, Haaland not chipping in with the goals. But even still, Haaland has been serviced by these players in the past, just not at the volume that we'd like. It was a game for one of them to really grab it by the scruff of the neck, and they just didn't, flat out as a collective, really.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because they're not going missing. Like, they're not anonymous. They're involved in the game, and they're getting on the end of chances, and they're making the right runs, and they're picking up the ball in dangerous areas, and all that good stuff that's kind of 85% of the battle. And then it just, the final pass, the final shot, the final decision just is always so poor. And Oscar Bob, I think, is somebody that does a lot of the right stuff, and I think that's pretty obvious because he came up through the City Academy, and he kind of knows how to play the City way in a sense. Savinho for me was the most frustrating because it feels like he never picks his head up. And he'll get into a dangerous position.
I'm completely the opposite. I'm
the opposite as well, actually. Yeah.
Go on.
Really, for me, it felt like I have two clear chances in my head where he got on the end of like a through ball and could have crossed it into the box for Haaland. He didn't pick his head up and just banged it into the defender's legs in front of him. Whereas if he picks his head up, he could take a touch and actually make an accurate cross. But maybe you see it differently.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, go on, Matt.
But sorry, I just think when Savinho, I've said it a few times, when Savinho's on the left-hand side, I think he looks not just more comfortable, but way more threatening. And I think, don't get me wrong, there were moments, maybe his touch or his decision-making, maybe having his head down. But them type of things, they can be ironed out. I think just seeing the positive play down the left-hand side, and then as soon as Doku comes on and he goes over to the right, it straight away looks like he's overcomplicating everything, double guessing everything that he does.
Going back,
yeah. And it just completely removes any sort of threat that we have down that hand side. I know by the end of the game, I think it was kind of like Marmouche or Cherky kind of out there. But from that moment on, we had zero threat going down the right hand side. And I just think for Savinho anyway, I'm don't get me wrong, I've criticised Savinho quite a bit this season, but I think today and in the week, I think he's not been the biggest problem, and I think it was more Jeremy Doku who I was disappointed with when he came on. I thought, like you said, Adam, he had a lot of the ball, he had a lot of good opportunities, but I just did nothing with it. Absolutely nothing with
Well,
it.
he's reverted back to pre-purple patch Doku. The
Yeah,
last
I know,
couple
it's
of
a
weeks.
shame.
I mean, he just
It's a
has.
shame.
I know it's the sort of it's the elephant in the room that we're not allowed to talk about online or on this podcast anymore. A fear of getting the Joe Butters treatment, but he's reverted back to the Doku that he was.
Which was
It's
always the
such a
fear,
shame.
really, wasn't it? Yeah, the sense
Yeah.
that if it's great stepping up, but the consistency was always the issue. Going back to sort of the original point with because obviously Bob and Savino started the game, and I think it's Doku disappointed. I agree when he came on, but maybe didn't have enough time to grow into the game. I don't know. It's always harder. For saying that though, you want him to make an impact off the bench, and he didn't. So I guess he's certainly involved in this conversation. But what the frustration for me with Savino versus Bob was, I totally agree in the sense that Savino was wasteful, and I actually thought, funnily enough, his first half against Villarreal wasn't that much different than it was against Aston Villa. The difference is that one of the crosses that he stuck into the box, perhaps aimlessly, found the head of Bernardo Silva, who stayed at home.
Yeah.
I thought he was wasteful against Villarreal at times, but I think that's kind of the player he is. Maybe a comparison, but not the right one necessarily. But Sterling was a wasteful winger, but he somehow managed to pop up with the goals and assists. Savino throughout his City career has done the assist part really well. The goals part, absolutely not. My issue with Oscar Bob was the fact that you said that, Adam. You didn't feel like any of them went missing. I think Oscar Bob goes missing far too often in matches. I think he's possibly not developing at the rate, which is fine because he had a very nasty injury. But there comes a point for me where you go from being a youngster with plenty of promise and one of those high numbers on your back, like 52 is it for Oscar Bob? There comes a point where you've got to go, you know what? I'm a Man City starter. I've got to make something happen, and I've seen too many times this season where it's not happening.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of what your definition of goes missing is, because I think he gets on the ball a ton and he tries to do things. He's not shirking away from any sort of responsibility. He's not hiding from the ball. He's trying to get on the ball and be positive and be direct and all that, but he just kind of runs down blind alleys so much. And I think maybe a lot
enough, if we're being honest. Like
that's another thing.
Bit of a kid out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Savino does too. I think in duels with like big physical fullbacks, Savino looks like he looks a bit like he can't handle it. And I hate to always revert back to speaking about players of the past, but you didn't have that issue with Gabriel Jesus. You didn't have that with Riyad Mahrez, players who weren't necessarily physical specimen, but they knew how to deal with physical defenders. They knew how to kind of use the weight that they had. And I don't know if this is just a simple fact of them being young and still somewhat new to the Premier League, but at a certain point, you have to do something different with this attack. And I think with Omar Marmoush beginning to get fit again and Ryan Cherki beginning to get fit again, hopefully we see something different in the coming weeks, just for some sort of spark and some fresh ideas. Because watching the trio of Doku, who has been great at times this season, but the trio of Doku, Bob, and Savino kind of run down blind alleys and typically make the wrong decision at the end of it all is it's frustrating, to say the least.
I think you get away with one, maybe two in your team, and I don't think we should sit here. There's a lot of talk about Michael Olise. I don't think it's any surprise we're already seeing that this early on in the season, because I think it's something that Guardiola, the recruitment team, Hugo Viana, etc., have identified, and possibly would have been something they would have, not saying Olise per se, but in the summer, if there wasn't so much work to do elsewhere, maybe they'd have looked at bringing in a winger. But I think you can get away with one or two of them in your squad just when, and even as much as we've not seen Cherki, and at the times when he has come on, he's looked promising. I think you put him in that similar conversation of young, experienced-ish, but not necessarily at that sort of peak level in their career. And to be fair, Matt, I think you can feel sorry for a couple of these guys, because maybe Doku, maybe Savino, maybe Oscar Bob aren't ready to be the guys yet, but City's wide areas are calling out for somebody to step in and almost become a world-class player. Maybe that's unfair on them, but that's just the situation they find themselves in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Probably in the context of Savinho and Bob. Bob, the amount of football he's missed. Savinho only been at the club just over a year, but Jeremy Doku's been with us since we won the treble, pretty much. I think based on what you just said, I think you've got to look at Doku and be like, well, this is your third season now. It's kind of, and I know we've said it on this podcast a couple of times this season so far. Like, this is kind of crunch time for Doku this season. It's now or never a little bit, and that's kind of how I feel. And I think it's hard with like Savinho and Bob to be patient when they're starting so many games. We've got so much expectations for City, and yeah, you are missing a clinical, experienced winger there. Someone that's like a Mahrez, like a Sterling, like a maybe not Sane as such, but someone that knows the league, knows the team. There isn't that in our squad anymore. Since Mahrez left, and it is a crying shame, and it's definitely a position that the club probably will be looking at. Probably did look at in the summer. Like you say, there was that much work to do. There was going to be some positions on the pitch that they weren't going to cover, but yeah, at the moment it's just looking, just the way the three of them play is very immature and very predictable.
Bit rash. Yeah.
Bit rash, yeah.
What date did the transfer window close this summer? Was it September 1st?
September 4th, I think.
I wonder if the City hierarchy saw the first few weeks of the season, because the season started mid-August, and thought they would get goals from midfield from Tijani Reinders on a regular basis, and he hasn't scored since the opening day at Wolves. And on that day, if you'd asked me, I'd say, oh, they'll get double-digit goals from him in all competitions this season, just based on that. Just based on that alone.
And look, I do think there's been a touch of unluckiness with Reinders. He's hit the bar twice, I think. For me, it feels like it's coming, but I totally get what you mean. And obviously, I agree in the sense that had the Savinho stuff happened earlier as well, we've seen wheels moving there. So something that I've seen pop up quite a lot lately. People saying City rejected 70 million quid for Savinho. I don't know if any of you guys can remember. I'm pretty sure Spurs didn't bid that.
I think
one of the sticking issues the fact they didn't bid
the report was City wouldn't take anything below 70 million. 70 million was like,
and that's where that numbers come from. Yeah.
That's to get you in the door of negotiating. It wasn't that they rejected a 70 million bid offer. I think there's like a general bigger picture conversation we could have of, I think after last season, so many people were desperate for like the entire rebuild of a squad that had 6, 7, 8 integral players leave over a 2 to 3 year window. Your De Bruyne's and Gundogan's and Mahrez's and Jesus and all these players that contributed. And a lot of these players weren't necessarily players who necessarily like won you trophies single-handedly, but they played such a big role in the squad. I think it's still like, we still have to have the conversation of, it's still just going to take time to get City back to that level. And I think, in the past 12 months, since January, they've made leaps and bounds in bringing in players like Kusanov and Ait-Nouri and Nico O'Reilly into the fold to shore up things defensively, and, bringing Reinders in and getting your kind of stalwart midfielder alongside Rodri to be the new Gundogan and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to happen bit by bit. And now you can go into January or into next summer. I know it's crazy to be talking about next summer, but like now, this other weakness that you can add to, or that you can fix. I think it's just, we still have to have the big picture conversation of, there was so much turnover from the treble season to now. And it was always going to take like 3 to 4 transfer windows to actually get City back to that level. And I think the one part of the squad that got neglected was out on the wing, and knowing that you had nothing but young, rough gems in there. But like, can you blame them? They still went out and spent 250 odd million euros or pounds on midfielders, defenders, Ederson leaving and bringing in a new type of goalkeeper and all this stuff. So I don't know. I think it's just worth mentioning that like it's still going to have to happen sort of bit by bit.
Yeah, it feels to me like this last two transfer windows, City caught up to a place where they ought to have been beforehand because they waited on the hands so long. And you are going to have to, ideally, I think we would have seen a bit of movement on the wing department.
And if I'm being honest, I'd rather, if I could ask Hugo Viana, I'd rather him start by bringing in fresh young center backs and fullbacks and legs into midfield before he goes out and spends 80 million on a flashy winger who's going to get you 15 goals. I'd rather you build the platform from the bottom up and kind of make yourself a formidable team.
Success. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like having a nice shiny Apple CarPlay in a rusty old banger.
Yes.
It feels like City are building a nice vehicle, and I do think the signs to be positive, Matt. Obviously, this has been the most doom and gloomy podcast for a while. The second half, like we've kind of discussed the second half without discussing the second half because it was a lot of get the ball out wide, meh. Bring it back inside if needed. Obviously, Jadon Sancho had a chance and nearly-ish scored. I think Donovan was fairly comfortable with that low shot down to his left-hand side. But otherwise, Villa, I'm struggling to work out. Did Villa win the game or did City lose the game? I know that sounds obviously both of them happened, but you kind of get where I'm coming from.
I think we just didn't take it to them in the second half. I think it was clear that in the second half that City had all the ball, like you say. We had time on the ball. It was all on us to create it and make it happen, and we just didn't. It was a lot side to side, and like you say, a lot of meh happening on the wing. Not enough, commitment, and we finally saw that at the very end of the game. And I know it was an offside goal, but that was the first time I think in the second half that we actually got in behind their back line, and it's infuriating that was in the 90th minute, and obviously it was slightly offside. But I think if we score that goal, say that goal was onside, I think we'd probably go, you know what, fair result. I don't know
if City deserved. I don't know if this is us being delusional. I don't know if City deserves to lose after all of that. We've been so negative, but it was such a weird game to try and work out.
It was, but I genuinely felt like it was like almost attack versus defense. Plain and simply, it was attack versus defense in that second half, and City didn't do enough. I think that is enough, but Villa just didn't. They didn't threaten. But tell you what, if Jadon Sancho did score in what I think the commentator said when he came on, he's only played 9 minutes this season for Villa. If he came on and scored after the few years he's had, I would have thought, all right, never mind. Let's scrap it, move on to next week, because, oh my God, if he scores against us, then you can forget it. But no, like you say, they didn't carry much threat. So I think it's on us. I think we lost the game. I think we lost it.
I'm inclined to agree, Adam. I think City... I don't know if Villa were there for the taking. Look, Villa have obviously had a decent run of form. They've annoyingly come back straight into sort of a hot streak as City go to Villa Park, which is, quietly becoming the new White Hart Lane for City in terms of bogey teams and going away to teams. Thankfully, they're not in the Champions League this year. But I do think, City possibly could have done a lot more, and they didn't, which is fine. It's early days in this rebuild, isn't it, still?
I think so, yeah. I think City had their moments to go on and at least pull themselves level, but I think you also have to give credit to Villa that there is an art to bending and not breaking, and I thought they did that really well in the second half. And sometimes you have to be lucky to be good, and they were, and with the offside call and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, the Pau Torres clearance off the line.
I've never seen that before. I don't know if any of you guys would have. I doubt it. Celtic played Hearts earlier on Sunday, and there was not an almost identical, but like a ball across, defender semi-facing the wrong way, stuck it top bins in his own net. I think if you ask Pau Torres to do that 100 times, 99 of them, it ends in a goal for City.
Yeah. And I think on the whole, like, maybe it's one of those potential watershed moments in terms of they weren't playing all that well for a couple of weeks, but they got results. And I don't know, I don't necessarily doubt the mentality of the City team in any way, shape, or form, but I think you can lull yourself into a little bit of a false confidence if you're getting results from poor performances. So maybe it's just kind of a moment to reset.
Reality check.
Yeah, kind of reality check. And I think is it Swansea next in the League Cup?
In the Cup.
FA Cup?
After that. The 3 games after that are gigantic. Bournemouth
massive,
at home,
massive.
And I think at home, Liverpool at home.
I think Swansea's a really useful fixture. Maybe Omar Marmoush starts up front, and Holland and Shirky as well, and just get some of these players who can be a different dimension and just a fresh look, a fresh spin on things to get some minutes in their legs and try and get some sort of rhythm, because I think if City are going to do anything in the next few weeks, and like you said, there's a massive run of fixtures coming up, they will need some production from elsewhere. And at the moment, it's the guys who haven't had a chance to do it yet that you'd hope it's going to come from.
I'd actually leave Haaland at home. Do you know? It's like
With a nice ice pack on his balls, playing some Minecraft.
Yeah.
With a big steak.
That's one for his next vlog, isn't it? Day in the life of fixing my bollocks. But I genuinely, it's like when you don't want to be on your phone, like I don't know, revising for exams, and you don't want that sort of that temptation of picking up your phone and doom scrolling. Just put it in a different room. Leave Haaland in a different room and tell those fuckers, find goals. You've not got him there to score. Do it yourself. And look, we'll finish on a positive, Matt. And again, maybe this is the delusion calling in and the blue tinted glasses, but I do think you can find positives in defeats, really, especially where I and we collectively don't believe it was car crash sort of panic stations, rip up the whole sort of form book, blah, blah. There was frustrating parts, don't get me wrong. But going into that run of fixtures, Swansea, like, if they rotate the team, I personally want to see City do decent in the League Cup this season. I think you can't hang your hat on a title race or a Champions League run, because I don't know where City are in terms of, the top end of that competition. Winning a trophy is winning a trophy, and the League Cup previously was obviously so great to City. I understand why the previous years Pep has sort of neglected it a little bit because squad size, other priorities, blah, blah. I want to see City do decent in the League Cup, but if they lose on Wednesday, whatever. Going into Bournemouth, Dortmund, Liverpool, I think there can be a world where this result is a reality check, is all right, you know what, like Adam says, no false sense of security. I've been on the side of, like, I thought the performances were more good than bad. I know some people have been saying the wins were, papering over cracks, blah, blah. But at the same time, you do want to see improvements. And I do think that can maybe relight that hunger after what has been a very good couple of weeks. But still, there's more room to go, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, no disrespect to Swansea, because obviously, whenever we play a team that's in the EFL, in the Cup, I always have flashes of Wigan. I'm never going to take it for granted, but I think it is a very good fixture for us to have, to build a bit of confidence back up, and as well, like Adam alluded to, them players that we need to get a bit more from, well, who haven't had enough chances this season, the likes of Cherki, Marmoush, to have a run out. Ryan Aït-Nouri as well, who's obviously come back from injury as well. I think that'd be a useful game for him. But yeah, today it's not a head loss at all. It's not like, loads of things went wrong. It's we understand how we lost. Like, Villa scored a very good goal that maybe 9 times out of 10 doesn't go in or doesn't even get past the back four. Donnarumma might even read it better and make a save. And on another day, Haaland puts that one-on-one away, and Marmoush wasn't a millimetre offside or whatever it was. So it's not, we weren't awful. And it's not a game that, for me, kills our momentum at all. I think it's a little hiccup. Hopefully we'll learn from it. And hopefully we can bounce back in the week. And maybe if we get a couple of goals that isn't Haaland related, I think that's even better for me.
Yeah. Adam, anything else to add?
Yeah, I'll
Apart
leave
from
us
you got
with this.
points deductions in the prediction league for not giving us an
I did.
answer.
I had the traveling excuse, but I'll leave us with this positive note. This is a quote from Pep in the post game. He said, quote, "I don't live in October, November thinking, oh, what is going to happen if we don't win the Premier League?" End quote.
Nice.
Cold.
Yeah, I like that. Sweet. Matt, you didn't get any points in the prediction league, but you've actually moved one closer to Adam by virtue of Adam getting a deduction. One of 3 players who have got a deduction. Ollie Kirsch, I think he's resigned. That's 3 points deductions in his last 4 matches. So I think he's out of it. He's rock bottom. John Ashley, the only person to get points of any kind, and it was a correct score, obviously, predicting Villa to win 1-0. I imagine John, throughout this prediction league, will just go on, like, build up points from just predicting negative City results. Yeah, he'll middle out because he often predicts City's defeats in games that they're going to win. But yeah, Matt, I think that'll do, unless you've anything else to add.
No, not at all. Just, I don't think it's anything crazy that we've lost today. I think we just need to, obviously we've all got our heads, but, just keep our heads, stick together. I'm sure the boys will bounce back in the week, and Up the Blues. Up the Blues.
Nice. Guys, it's been a pleasure. We will leave you there. If you want more City Ramble stuff, social media, all sorts going on. Get involved. Until next time, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you later.